electricity grid goes down, you're back in the 1880s pre-electricity.
If 1,000 transformers are knocked out, we'll end up with massive social disruption.
Top former energy official claims an attack on an American power grid was terrorism.
Virtually every study you'll see has an anarchistic component that leads to rioting. It is almost inevitable.
Imagine what will happen if there's no food, no power, no money, and no transportation. Only people with guns and the boldness to go and take what they need to survive will live.
It could literally end civilization as we know it.
Cyber attack, an EMP, even a massive solar flare. They're all capable of exposing our power grid as America's Achilles heel.
Of particular concern to me are people who believe it's God's will to destroy us.
Our electric power grids are as vulnerable to cyber attack as the thousands upon thousands of businesses, companies, government agencies that have already been hacked over the last few months. It's not a question of if, it's just a question of when.
We spend $800 billion on our military.
And we're not willing to spend $50 to $100 billion to protect our society?
An EMP pulse is a very dangerous threat. If you're not nuclear hardened, it will shut down any digital computer that is operating in the range of the EMP.
Other countries have appointed a single champion to be in charge of protecting their electric grids.
We know what needs to be done. It's just a matter of a will to do it.
The Congressional EMP Commission determined that if for whatever reason the national power grid in America becomes compromised, that means becomes compromised indefinitely. That would mean that services and infrastructure like banks, dry goods, fresh food, fuel, transportation, medical, federal and state government services, emergency services, that includes police and first responders, if they become greatly reduced or more likely completely disabled within a year of that happening, within the year of the lights going out, 9 out of 10 Americans will die from starvation, disease, societal collapse, and on and on. Now, it's not fear-mongering to say this. It's not clickbait. And what you're going to hear today are just the brute facts of the situation. The most up-to-date numbers on the population of the United States is 335,659,000 and about 600 living souls. So in good times, we see one birth every 9 seconds, one death every 11 seconds. But in this scenario that we've just described, in the most likely catastrophic scenario, the average we would see would be something like 10 deaths per second. But it's even worse than that because people don't start dying immediately. It takes a few weeks for starvation and violence to set in. So it's more likely that once it starts, you might see like 12 to 13 deaths per second. That's just the math. That's not a real world scenario, but that's what's possible. Technology makes it possible for us to grow and sustain this kind of a population in America. And once that fails, once you lose these modern systems, the ability to provide food, clean water, communications, government services that all work together to keep society running orderly, well, then you've got trouble. So today we have as a special guest, Jonathan Hollerman. Let me get his bio here for you. Jonathan Hollerman, Deputy Director, U.S. Task Force on National and Homeland Security, former military S.E.R.E, Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape Instructor, #1 best-selling author. And by the way, we want to make available today, we want to give one of our viewers one of his books, Survival Theory, Preparedness Guide, this one. Well, we've got some graphics for that and make it a little easier to see. There you go. Let's get full screen here. There you go. Electromagnetic Defense Task Force, senior fellow at the EMPact America, member Secure the Grid Coalition, president of Grid Down Consulting, and that is this website, and that's how we came to find Jonathan Hollerman. Let's go ahead and introduce you. Welcome, Jonathan. It's great to have you here, and we look forward to you sharing your wisdom with us and our audience today. Welcome. Of course, I've got the. Now we go.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
There we go. Yeah. All right. So, folks, we've been battling the gremlins. You know, it's Halloween, so we've got the technology worked out, and we're happy to have Jonathan with us here today, a brother in Christ, which is really nice to find when we're talking about these topics. So, Jonathan, in your book, you lay out that there are four most likely are major threats, and people don't really pay much attention to this. Nuclear war, a grid down scenario, which could be achieved with an electromagnetic pulse. We'll talk about that in detail in a minute so people know what that is. Also a pandemic. And I think you wrote this before 2020. Is that right? Did this come?
Yeah, that book was written. Oh man, that was written probably 7 or 8 years ago.
Yeah. So the number 3 on the list there is the pandemic, and whatever it was that we saw in 2020, that's how it was defined. And there's also a number 4 is the risk of a financial collapse. I think we'll talk about those in depth here in a minute. But I think what's interesting is right off the bat in the book, you're explaining how people are unaware because nobody in the media is talking about this. In fact, people are so I guess conditioned. You mentioned in here in the opening of the book something like on the idea of gun violence. Just explain that, if you would. Set us up there. Why it is that people don't really know what the threats are. Why are we so unaware of the most crucial threats to our survival?
Most people get their information via the news, whether that be a large percentage of people are starting to get their information from social media today. Before it was the news broadcasts, but regardless of where you're getting your information, I regularly say that I believe we're living in a post-truth world. It's hard to know what's true and what's not true. It doesn't matter what subject the media is covering. You just don't know what to believe. You go to CNN, you get one story. You go to Fox News, you get another story. You go to some other more internet-based, research-based news outlets, and you get a completely different story. But as far as the threats that face the American people, a lot of times it's considered preparedness, emergency preparedness, depending on what circles you run in. There are multiple things that the government recommends that you be aware of. And obviously like hurricanes and tornadoes and short-term fires and natural disasters, things of that nature. They tell you to have 3 days worth of food and water and in your basement or as backup in case, it takes 3 days for FEMA to get there. But what the American people are unaware of is there is a very serious threat to our entire way of life, and that is a national grid down event. Most Americans have no idea that enemy nations and terrorist organizations have the ability to completely and fundamentally destroy our electric grid. And so when you hear that, a lot of people, the first thing they would say was, well, how could they do that? It's a hugely intricate machine spread out across the entire American continent. And what you have to understand, the America's Achilles heel is the high voltage transformers. So there's about 3,000 of them across the country. They weigh about 400 tons each. They are built in Germany and South Korea primarily. Recently, we've been buying them from China, but that's a whole nother topic. And they take about, on average, between 24 and 36 months to build for each location and to send here. And we only replace about 12 a year. Whether it be through cyber, a large solar flare, an EMP attack, there are multiple ways that we could lose those high voltage transformers. And the fact of the matter is we are going to be without power for a very long time. I would go so far as to say is if we lose power for more than a couple months, it's probably never coming back on. So This isn't really fear-mongering. I am the Deputy Director of the U.S. Task Force on National and Homeland Security, EMPtaskforce.us. I was also a member of the Electromagnetic Defense Task Force, which is a joint services wargaming operation down at LeMay Wargaming Institute. And we wargamed this scenario with all the military branches. All your alphabet agencies were there. The DOE, the National Security Council was there. Your Nuclear Regulatory Agency was there. So we basically wargamed this scenario. And what the American people have to realize is if in the case of a national grid down event, it's considered beyond design basis. There is no government plan. There is no military plan. FEMA has no plan for a national grid down event. We're headed towards World War III. If anybody's been paying attention to the news lately, it's probably going to happen in our lifetime. And the future of warfare is warfare in electromagnetic spectrum, and our enemies have the ability to completely destroy our electric grid. And that, like you mentioned in the intro, that would kill 9 out of 10 Americans within the first year. So there's a whole lot here to unpack. This sounds kind of crazy town. I get it. Sounds sci-fi, but there's tons of documentation, and this is not science fiction. This is America's Achilles heel, and it is the biggest threat I would say to our country.
I think the thing that was most surprising, I don't know if that's honest. Maybe I'm not surprised. I'm just is the fact that our federal government anyway doesn't really have anything yet in place to the grid's not, as you say, it hasn't been hardened. In the trailer there at the opening of the video, that was a movie called Grid Down, Power Up. That is well, how accurate, if folks have seen that movie and we've shown that trailer now, what do you recommend that, and what do you think about 100%?
That movie? Every American needs to see that movie. The documentary is called Grid Down, Power Up. It was directed by David Tice, and it was narrated by Dennis Quaid. So it's less than an hour of your life, but it really introduces you to the topics that we're kind of covering today. So it is absolutely accurate, 100%. I recommend everybody needs to go out and check that out and get a better understanding of what we're facing, because, again, everybody just assumes when they flick on a light switch, the lights are always going to come on. When they turn the faucet on, clean water is going to come on. Whether it be in war or by terrorist attack, they take down our national electric grid through cyber, through an EMP attack. Nothing works. There's no food, interstate trucking. There's no food at your grocery store. It's never coming back. There's no gas stations, no internet, no phones, no banking, no TV. There's none, like your heat and your air conditioner in your house isn't going to function. No fresh water. All the sewage facilities are going to start backing up. If you live in a low elevation area.
I've heard you talk about that, and that was really, I never thought about that. And that's the point. We want to understand the threat today. And that is one of those threats that I just had never thought about. But if there's no infrastructure there, sewage is eventually, depending on where you are, is most likely just going to back up in your house. So you're not going to hole up in your house forever, right?
Yeah, well, people are going to keep using the restroom in the cities. They just don't know any better, and there's a lot of pressure there, and you're not going to be able to stick rags down your toilet or in your sink and stop this. You have to have a key on a 10-foot metal pole and shut it off out at the street. And again, it depends on what elevation. If you're at a higher elevation, and it may not affect you for a while, but if there's a lot of houses above you, let's put it that way, in a city, it's probably going to start bubbling into your house, and you're not going to be able to stop it. So your house is full of methane. Then it's not livable. I lived for many years in the city of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It's a lot of very old row houses and different sections of that city. I mean, there's no water in the fire hydrants. Not that the trucks may not even be able to get there due to gridlock traffic and no street lights working. But you have a fire. If it's in the winter, somebody starts does something dumb to try and heat their house, catches their house on fire. There's no stopping it. It could catch, entire sections of these old cities on fire. It sounds like I'm fear-mongering, but I'm literally scratching the surface of the devastation. What you have to understand, every aspect of human life today revolves around electricity. Without electricity, the Congressional EMP Commission, which is a bipartisan, they spent 4 years studying this threat, and they warned Congress. This is a continental time machine. You have to figure that the people that live today don't have the life skills that we had 100, 150 years ago, the people that crossed the Great Divide. They just don't. 2% of our population grow the food for the rest of the other 98%. Even the country people that I live next to out here, most of them don't. Very few of them, almost none, have a root cellar at this point, understand root cellaring. The country people that I associate with and that I live around, I mean, they have a garden, but a lot of times they get their tomato plants at the nursery. They have no idea how much they have to grow to make it through an entire year, to live off of for an entire year till your next harvest season. So there's a 1,000 factors here that we could discuss, but it's going to get very, very ugly. And the whole point of this was the media is not talking about it. The American people just largely have no clue the death and destruction that's going to follow this. So if I would highly recommend, I have a white paper. The leadership at the Electromagnetic Defense Task Force, when it was over, they asked me, my kind of expertise is in starvation and that line of things. So they asked me to write a white paper for the military. It's 122 pages. It's called Grid Down Death of a Nation, the physiological and psychological effects of starvation, human desperation, and living without rule of law in a long-term grid down event. You can download that from my website, gridddownconsulting.com, in the resources tab, or you can go to EMPtaskforce.us and you can download it there as well. So that really paints the picture that I'm just kind of skirting the top off here of like what the aftermath of a long-term grid down event, how it's going to affect the military. I discuss, the military gets their food delivered interstate trucking. With interstate trucking, that's just going to stop. No trucker from Texas is going to drive across country to deliver goods when there's mass rioting and looting happening 3 or 4 days into this. The gas pumps don't work, so they won't be able to resupply anyway. So the military gets all their food on the truck, just like your local grocery store does. And I have reports on my website, DoD reports, 99% of the United States military bases in this country receive 99% of their electricity from the civilian electric grid. Outside of our nuclear triad and a couple other things, the average military base, they're going to have no power, they're going to have no sewer, they're going to have no water, they're going to have no food, just like anywhere else. So the military has warned Congress, if we lose the civilian electric grid, unlike all the Hollywood movies you've seen, there is not going to be any box trucks rolling down the road passing out MREs. It's just never going to happen. You're going to be on your own.
Did you ever see the series Jericho, that CBS series from 2007?
Yeah, we watched that. It was pretty good.
Sorry about it. Skeet Ulrich. By the way, folks, Summer is live with us today. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I was,
we had so many crazy things with the technical difficulties coming in. So
right. So welcome and thanks for being with us here today, Summer. So yeah, we watched Jericho, and that was a series on CBS years ago, and the premise was there was a nuclear attack. Mm-hmm. Was it an attack? And they were basically dirty bombs, so it wiped out sections of the nation. But what was interesting about what you were just saying is that it's just not the case that the military is going to show up and save the day here. In fact, in that series, after they had been there for a period of months, maybe even a year at this point,
some sort of shadow government shows up.
Yeah, their tanks are rolling down the street, and everybody at first, and then they're like, finally they're here, and no, it wasn't the military. It was imposters who were disguised as the military. Somehow they'd got a hold of a tank and some uniforms.
Yeah, but the point is like we're on our own,
and they were there to take. They were there to take, not to help. So that would be a more likely scenario, right, than actually the military coming to save the day. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely, I would agree. And in my recommendations at the EDTF, one of my recommendations was not to send the National Guard into the cities. I mean, the cities are going to fall apart so fast. These large population centers, they have no food infrastructure They have no food infrastructure to be self-sufficient. So once the grocery stores are cleaned out, within a week or two, people are really going to start starving. You send the National Guard into that scenario, yeah, they can come in there and quell the riot and quell the looting, but that situation is going to turn on its head within a week or two. So as the National Guard's food starts running out, or as the people just start getting so desperate, you're going to end up with 5,000 troops in downtown Dallas. And 5 million well-armed Texans. That's not going to go well for the National Guard. So it's just a lot of what obviously we know what Hollywood puts out is fiction and it's entertainment value. I am familiar with Series Jericho. I didn't watch the whole thing. I did watch some of it. Most of the shows that they put out on this are pretty unrealistic. There's a really good book that I would recommend. New York Times bestseller. It's called 1 Second After by William Forstchen, the first book in the series. That is about a small town in North Carolina called Black Mountain, rural town that survives after an EMP attack. It's an excellent book. The one issue that I take with that book is towards the end of the book, there's a time jump. I'm not giving you any spoilers here, but there's a time jump for I don't know, like 3, 4, 5 months through winter, and then all of a sudden the story picks back up. And again, they have the military roll down the street, which I don't believe is going to be true. It could be so. But the point is they never explain how they fed that town of, I think there was like 400 survivors through that 4 months. The whole issue here is food. The average American eats 1,000 pounds, a metric ton, 2,000 pounds, a single metric ton of food every single year. So a town like that would have to supply its townspeople. It would have to be bringing in a metric ton of food every day in a world where people are killing each other over a can of peaches at the grocery store. So that's the big issue. I mean, you can find water, you can learn how to purify water. Unless you're in Nevada or Arizona, you're going to run into more difficulties there. But if you live in most of the continental United States, you can figure out how to get water. It's the food that's going to be an issue. Our food infrastructure relies on just-in-time distribution. So when you swipe a can of peas at the grocery store, there's a little computer in that cash register that tells the grocery store distribution center, put another can on the next truck. The distribution center sends another signal to the canning facility. We need another can of beans or another can of peas on the next truck. And then the canning facility sends a electronic signal to the farm in Mexico. We need another truckload of peas when you get the chance. So basically our food infrastructure is just in time. The grocery stores don't have storehouses in the back like they used to 20 or 30 years ago. They get trucks in there every day or two. It's all automated. It's all computer generated. The trucks, everything, the distribution centers, it's all run by computers. And basically our food infrastructure in this country relies on trillions of electronic signals flying around this country every single day. You get rid of that, and everything stops where it's at. So when your grocery store runs out of food, it will never get resupplied. Interstate trucking just doesn't function in this scenario. So, it's kind of it's a scary proposition. And that report that I recommend everybody reads, it lays out the effects on humankind of starvation and human desperation with firsthand accounts, historical accounts of different the periods of time where there's been mass starvation, the Holodomor, the Chinese famine, the Bengal famine, the Warsaw Ghetto, a lot of different periods, firsthand accounts. So a lot of people just don't understand what starvation is because we live in the richest country in the world. And really, if you want food in this country, you can find a place to get food.
Yeah. So this is what you see on the screen here. This is the paper, right? What do we call this? We call this a paper. We call this a report, the Grid Down Death of a Nation.
Yeah, it's a report. It's a white paper. It's 122 pages, so it's a long one. But and so that's available for free because I want if you want a paperback copy, you can get it on Amazon. But if you want it, it's easier to share it PDF wise, so you can download it for free on my website or at the EMP Task Force website.
Yeah, I was showing Jonathan just before we went on the air. We went there and we downloaded it. We just took it to Office Depot and and it wasn't cheap, but it's worth it because this will hold together a little longer. Now, what's your Summer? There's something in the chat.
Oh no, that's okay. Somebody was just saying, as the mayor of Leland, tell me what to do to keep my town safe. So we had somebody in the chat.
Sure. So to answer that question, I've actually been hired. So I have a company called Grid Down Consulting for the last 10, 12 years, and I work with primarily high net worth individuals and help them build off-grid secure infrastructure in different parts of the country. I've also worked with two mayors. I worked with a mayor of a small town out in Utah, about 600 or 700 people, and I worked with a mayor up in north of Montreal. I don't remember the area, and I'm not going to name the towns. But so in both cases, those mayors flew me out. And the second one, I told them I probably shouldn't come because of my experience on the first one. But they had read 1 second after, and they were excited about, hey, we want to set our town up for success when this happens, or if this happens. So I met with the mayor. We looked at all the resources in their town. We looked at all the resources in the surrounding area. There was a lot of cattle. There was a lot of grain in that area, the grain bins. We tallied everything up, and
wow,
we
that's
spent
really
2 or 3 days
encouraging.
wargaming this for this mayor. And at the end of 2 days, basically what we discovered was it is not possible to maintain 500 people long term in that scenario. And within a couple of weeks of that, the mayor had completely given up. And same thing happened up in Canada. The other mayor that I worked with briefly, I spent less time with him just because I had the previous experience with the other mayor. It's just not feasible. Again, I mentioned you have to bring in, if you're a town of 700 people, you have to supply 2 metric tons of food for your town today. That's with no interstate trucking. That's with no resources. You can't pick up the phone and call somebody. There's no internet. You can't email anybody. You just have to figure out how to supply 2 metric tons of food to feed your town every single day. Then you have to prepare that food. How do you distribute that food? How is it cooked? If it's grain in the grain bins, commercial grinders, how do you power the commercial grinders? All with diesel. Where do you resupply on diesel? It was a checklist. We just went down. And the further you get down, you just like, this isn't going to work with millions and millions of dollars of prior investment, prior planning. But that's not in the cards for most small towns with a small budget. So you might have a lot of resources right around the town, but from day one, you have to keep your people fed. So if people are like, well, we're going to grow our own food. Well, what happens if this happens in winter, which is probably most likely to happen to cause the most death and destruction from an enemy nation? But you've got to wait at minimum 60 to 90 days before your vegetables start growing, before you start getting potatoes. So let's just call it 75 days for average production. That's assuming you get stuff in the ground today, right? And it's springtime, your fields were already you just happen to have a whole bunch of seed laying around, and you get it in the ground that day. 75 days, where are you going to get 75 tons of food to keep those people fed till that stuff grows? So it's complicated. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, thanks for that. Yeah,
sorry, I didn't mean to. I realize I'm not a ray of sunshine, but I mean, this is my business. I've been running these circles for a while, and that's the most frustrating part of this. I was down in Texas with Senator Bob Hall here just a couple months ago, trying to get legislation down and get the grid hardened in Texas. And we get defeated at every turn. The electric utilities fight us at every turn. We do not have a hardened electric grid. We're trying to convince the government. That's the whole point of our organization, is to try and bring awareness to these threats and get the American people to push their representatives to act. And if you want to hear in a bit, I can explain why we're in the situation we're in with the electric utilities and the government and why nothing's been done.
Yeah, and I think people are surprised. I say people, I mean me, are surprised at just how dependent we are on technology now when it comes to our food. As you mentioned, how the grocery stores, these markets are really, they just keep enough. There's really nothing in the back anymore. Like you go to these Sam's, Walmart, wherever. Most of these places have everything out on the shelves, and once it's gone, it's gone, or it's going to be replenished within a little while. But if there's a hiccup there, as we've seen, since 2020, we did get I think maybe there's a lot of things that happened that came out of 2020 that have been very good. It shook up the church. A lot of churches shut down, and then those that came back and that were once everybody understood what was happening and what wasn't happening, faithful churches grew. They really grew, and And we also learned that how delicate, how fragile, I guess, our supply chain system is. So we're really just hanging on a thread. And today that thread is technology, as you just described. And a lot of money in the government today is going toward climate change, to somehow or another affect the climate of the world or whatever they think they're doing. But we've got this quote too. We'll bring this up now. Admiral Mike Rogers. Just so there are elements within our leadership that are aware and are paying attention. So tell us what Mike Rogers did in 2014 in this testimony. What was it he said? And you also mentioned along with that FEMA is actually telling you on their website to be prepared. Those two things there.
Yeah, that's right. FEMA is basically telling you, they're not showing, well, they don't discuss this. This is not even on their checklist. They've done studies before, and essentially they've considered this beyond design basis. Even though this is the future of warfare, this is where the next war is going to be fought in the electromagnetic spectrum with drones, cyber attacks on infrastructure, and people are like, well, why would they do this? Everybody's scared about all-out nuclear war, which is a potential threat, but with one nuclear weapon detonated 300 kilometers above the earth, above our country, launched from a submarine or off a cargo ship out of Iran, from a K-Club missile launcher, they can take out all the electronics or most of the electronics in the country, but they can take out our entire electric grid with one weapon. Okay, and like I said, the military, as I said, they can't function without electricity because all their electricity comes from the civilian electric grid. We do have nuclear triad for defense, but the problem is when you detonate a nuclear weapon up in the atmosphere, we don't know who did it. Unlike when it's detonated above the ground, you can go down there and the day after, the guys in the white suits, they sift through the soil and they test it. We can say, oh, this country attacked us, and then, I guess we could bomb them. But when it's detonated at 300 kilometers up in the atmosphere, it doesn't kill anybody instantly other than the planes that fall out of the sky or, some other instances that could happen. It's just, it is the future of warfare. You can win a war on day one without a soldier firing a single bullet. Every enemy nation of ours, Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, every nuclear country in the war doctrine, we have it. We have unclassified reports that I have on my website that I can share with you. First strike doctrine for every nuclear country at this point is an EMP attack. It's just, it just is what it is. Because if you can first strike, if you can take out the enemy nation's entire electric grid, you win the war on day one. Iran has called this Sharia compliant because they don't actually kill a single person. In their opinion, this is considered cyber warfare for them. Iran also has the fourth largest cyber army in the world, by the way, and we're just about, we're getting pretty close to getting in a war with them, but I digress. They consider Sharia compliant because they don't actually kill anybody. In their war doctrine, as far as this being first strike territory, they say that an EMP attack, the American people's our arrogance and our reliance on electricity is what kills us. They don't actually kill us. It's our fault that we die. So this is not off the wall. This is not, like I said, science fiction stuff. This is the future. America's kind of still trying to fight the wars of the past. We're still trying to build the fastest, most stealthiest planes, the biggest aircraft carriers, and the hardiest tanks. But we're watching that old last, we're still trying to fight the war from yesteryear. Mm-hmm. And a lot of these enemies, we're watching what's happening in Ukraine with drones and taking out huge, Russia's military forces. When they marched, they had way more armament. They had way more munitions and stuff, and futuristic warfare that we're supplying Ukraine with is pushing back a much larger force with that type of weaponry. And that's not even a great case of this, but that is where the future warfare is going. And people need to be aware that I believe there's, likely going to be a time in our lifetime where the grid comes down in this country.
We're on the edge. Yes.
I was going to ask you a question because it does seem that they are. One could make the case that they are doing this deliberately. They're not backing up. They're not updating the power lines, things like this. How many times have you gotten close to trying to get this done and yet it was kicked down?
So for 20 years, going back to Trent Frank's Right after the first EMP, we had the SHIELD Act. There's been three or four federal bills that they never make it out of committee. We've tried to just Texas has their own electric grid. There's 3 electric grids: the Eastern Interconnect, the Western, and the Texas grid. We've tried to just harden Texas. That failed. Basically, there's a reason for that. So I never want to put nefarious motive where stupidity and money and power can be the answer. Okay, so real briefly, semi-briefly, how this all works is the electric utilities are made up of a ton of different countries all around a ton of different companies all around this country. Okay, they're made up of distribution companies, power generation facilities, and it's broken up to a ton of companies, and they have an overarching authority called NERC, N-E-R-C. That's a North American Energy Reliability Corporation, and above them is a federal organization called FERC, and that's the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. So you have FERC and NERC. Okay, so it's kind of funny, but what the American people need to understand is the electric utility industry, which I've mentioned, every aspect of human life revolves around electricity today, is the last industry in this country that has no federal oversight. They have no federal regulation. The federal government can't regulate it. So, I mean, when you go to the store and you buy a can of food, you just put it in your cart, you go home and you eat it because the FDA inspects the canning facilities. When you get on a plane, we know the FAA is inspecting planes. When you buy a car, you can't build a car without a seatbelt. The federal government, and I'm a capitalist. It's not crazy that they're involved in every aspect of our life, but they're involved in every aspect of our life. But the electric utilities is the one area where FERC makes recommendations, security recommendations to NERC all the time, and they just don't. They don't have to follow it. They can't force them to do anything for security. And we're talking about a national security, the biggest national security threat to our country. So how it works now is self-regulation. The electric utility companies, they write their own security standards, their SIP standards, critical infrastructure protection standards. And they are required to write their own standards, and then they're required to keep their own security standards. If they break one of their own written standards, the enforcement mechanism is turn yourself in. So they turn themselves in to their own agency, to NERC. Yeah. NERC sets the fine. They pay the fine to NERC, okay? And what you need to realize, the electric utility lobby is the second largest lobbyist in Washington, D.C. They spend more money than big oil just at the federal level. In the last 10 years, they spent $1 billion in lobbying in Washington, D.C. Only pharmaceuticals have them beat. Okay, they do not want federal regulation, and that's where we're at. Is we have tried to get bills through, but the electric utilities, they own every politician on both sides of the aisle. Most every politician. Wow. I don't want to put that out there, but you can go and you can see exactly who they're giving money to, and they're giving money to people on the department, either the energy committees and on the cybersecurity committees. So the Congressional EMP Commission has warned. They gave us a warning to Congress in 2004, and there's a lot of intelligence behind this. There's a lot of stuff that's classified behind this, but the government knows that this is a threat. Mm-hmm. That every single one of them just hope, and this isn't a left or right thing, because we're talking about 5 administrations now, 5 administrations that have failed to act. So it's a very frustrating thing, because our organizations, EMPact America, that I was previously with, the U.S. Task Force on National Homeland Security, which I'm with now. There's a Secure the Grid Coalition. There's the FBI's InfraGard that we go to their meetings. So, I mean, there's organizations that are discussing this, but nobody's really funded. And the electric utilities have more money than God almost. So it's not a David and Goliath fight. It's like an ant and Goliath fight. And we just can't seem to wake people up to this very realistic future that we could be facing.
Mm-hmm. So this is another problem, right? It's a lack of preparedness. It's a lack of, as you say in the report here, it's a lack of general awareness. So now that would be, we've talked about the possibility of war. EMP, did you have another? Is there any point?
Well, I was just going to mention, remember with Norfolk Southern and the incident in Ohio and Palestine, and how, they brought in people to evaluate what was the cause of the railroad crash and this and that, and you find out that that's also an in-house thing. It's like, the railroad comes in and investigates itself,
It was amazing. You remember when that happened, Jonathan?
The science that's publicly available on this, this was on the solar flare threat. So
that's where I was headed next. Yeah, I wanted to say.
In 2004, the EMP Commission reports were the gold standard, and in 2019, the last EDTF, the Electromagnetic Defense Task Force meeting, the three-day wargaming, S.E.R.E, which is Electric Policy Research Institute, which is essentially the science wing of the electric utilities, put out a report the day we were meeting during this wargaming event, thinking we wouldn't respond. We did end up going to the courthouse and giving some presentations to the news media, but they dropped this report, a complete snake oil salesman. I mean, it's literally like the cigarette companies having a science division that says, cigarettes are perfectly safe for your health. So the Electromagnetic Defense Task Force, again, we're talking about missile defense guys, generals, people from different agencies and military, the biggest experts on EMP. They wrote a long rebuttal basically taking apart this S.E.R.E report piece by piece. However, that S.E.R.E report now is it gives the politicians cover. They can wave this around. So for the last probably 4 years now, they just the politicians, most of them don't really even talk to us much. There's a couple that are on our side, but for the most part, they just this ain't a real threat. And what we learned from that is the Congressional EMP Commission had caught wind that S.E.R.E was going to be doing this report on the vulnerability of the electric grid from solar flare. And so what you have to understand is most of the data on the EMP threat is top secret. It's need to know basis only. But they contacted S.E.R.E and said, hey, send your guys that are writing this report. We'll get them top secret classifications and we'll bring them in here. We'll show them the actual numbers. We'll show them the extra data. S.E.R.E wouldn't respond. They would not send people. So they built this report on faulty premises they tested like 8 kilovolts per meter instead of 50 or 80. And it was just like 1/10 of the testing. So basically what they're trying to tell the American people is you have this massive electromagnetic pulse that's going to hit our entire electric grid, and that it's not really going to do anything. It's just it's kind of laughable, and it's so again the electric utilities, and I don't want to really make them out super evil because at the end of the day it's about their shareholders. This would cost 20 to 40, 50 billion depending on how deep you harden our electric grid, and they don't want to raise electric rates and pass that on to the American people. The federal government, they can't write the check, because if they write the check, the electric utilities are going to have to prove that they've done the work. The electric utilities just don't want the federal government in their business, which I can kind of understand. But at the end of the day, they're providing a service that every aspect of human life revolves around. So, I mean, that if there's one area in the country that the federal government needs to be, looking over their shoulder, it should be this one.
Yeah, no doubt. You've got in the report, we talked a little bit about preparedness, of course, and the lack of preparedness from our federal government. And this, the likelihood of space weather, you mentioned that a little bit there, the geomagnetic disturbance, that's also in the paper, or extreme solar weather. And so we've got this Carrington event from 1859, where there wasn't a lot. The infrastructure wasn't then like it is now. We're really dependent on these systems, these microprocessors, and these very delicate systems. You've written. Can you tell us a little bit about that? I heard you talking about that on one of the interviews that you did, the Carrington event, and what that might look like today.
So we've been talking about basically a nuclear EMP attack. However, there's three other ways that the electric grid could. Second one, second most dangerous is a massive solar flare or CME. So those happen regularly throughout our history.
I think his connection.
Yeah, hold
is,
1 second there, Jonathan.
frozen.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I got froze here.
We got a it's just breaking up a bit, a little bit crunchy, and lost video for a second, or it's frozen. Let me see.
I'm gonna stop my second. I'll restart it. Eh?
Okay.
All right.
It's still frozen.
Yeah. I guess you could jump out and jump back into the stream. Try that. See if that works.
Yeah, just let me check my internet real quick.
All right.
Let me just see where I'm at. I when I say I live rurally, I mean I live rurally. I've got 12 houses within 2 square miles of me, so my internet does get spotty from time to time. So I hope that's not the issue.
You're not using Starlink?
No, so if you look at West Virginia and you find the one little spot that doesn't have service in West Virginia, that's where I live.
Wow.
They haven't got there's like one little gap, and I'm stuck in that gap. So I actually use Wi-Fi over the let me go ahead and jump out, and I'll jump back in.
Okay. Audio's good. We've got the audio figured out. All right, folks, thanks for joining us. Thanks for being with us today. Summer, what do you think so far about what we've heard?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that it's super interesting to hear the insight about what's been happening logistically, all of his involvement to try to push this legislation through and to bring awareness around it, and how the door just keeps slamming.
Yeah.
And what a large issue it is. So
yeah,
it seems like the perfect storm.
Yeah, if you guys, are you able to monitor the chat a bit? If folks, if you have any good questions, if you'll just type the word question in all caps. Yeah, something to get attention, and if we can manage it, we'll try to get that question to Jonathan before we finish up. But try to keep it, to something that we're covering here today.
I think he's back.
All right.
Yeah, I'm back. I don't understand why there's a lag. Are you getting a lag with my feed?
Yeah, just a bit. Yeah, it's like a few seconds.
I'm running straight from my camera. Let me look here.
The techno gremlins.
Yeah.
Let's run this. Let me run this trailer one more time. So, folks who've just been joining us, I'll run the trailer for the Grid Down Power Up movie, and we'll try to work out
Be back in a moment.
Our issues here.
The electricity grid goes down. You're back in the 1880s pre-electricity.
If 1,000 transformers are knocked out, we'll end up with massive social disruption.
Top former energy official claims an attack on an American power grid was terrorism.
Virtually every study you'll see has an anarchistic component that leads to rioting. It is almost inevitable.
Imagine what will happen if there's no food, no power, and no money, and no transportation. Only people with guns and the boldness to go and take what they need to survive will live.
It could literally end civilization as we know it.
Cyber attack, an EMP, even a massive solar flare. They're all capable of exposing our power grid as America's Achilles heel.
Of particular concern to me are people who believe it's God's will to destroy us.
Our electric power grids are as vulnerable to cyber attack as the thousands upon thousands of businesses, companies, government agencies that have already been hacked over the last few months.
It's not a question of if, it's just a question of when.
We spend $800 billion on our military.
And we're not willing to spend $50 to $100 billion to protect our society?
An EMP pulse is a very dangerous threat. If you're not nuclear hardened, it will shut down any digital computer that is operating in the range of the EMP.
Other countries have appointed a single champion to be in charge of protecting their electric grid.
We know what needs to be done. It's just a matter of a will to do it.
All right, there you go. Once again, Grid Down, Power Up. Jonathan recommends this film. Well, I think we've got your audio back now, perhaps. Hey.
So this isn't. I just grabbed a different camera. It's not gonna be that great of quality, but
that's all right.
How's that? That's gonna mess you up for the.
Nope, that'll work. No problem. No, we're in good shape.
It's not working.
We're having a solar flare. Remember, folks, check out the Survival Theory, a Preparedness Guide, How to Survive the End of the World on a Budget. Survival Theory 2 is also out now. We'll have Jonathan describe these books for you when we get him back. Hopefully we'll get him back. And we'd like to have him back on the show in the future. What we want to do here, I think, is Summer and I have been talking about this recently, is we want to talk about prepping. We want to talk about being prepared because we believe there's a biblical case for preparing, and Jonathan's actually written a biblical case, a biblical perspective on preparedness, which we'll talk about also today when we get Jonathan back. But don't you think, it's a good idea today. Mm-hmm. It's not a lack of faith to be prepared. In fact, we're going to show you from the scriptures where God has commanded us to be ready, faithfully, right? That which is not from faith is sin. So whatever we want to do is in faith, and being prepared is an act of faith. Here we go. Got him back now. Boom. Hey, there we go.
No, I'm not sure what's going on, man.
Well, we've got some audio.
I'm sorry. Yeah, give me one more minute. I'm trying a couple things out here real quick.
Okay, no worries. All right, how's the chat going over there, son? Anything happening over there? We do some Q&A.
Good. Somebody was asking about where we can find the movie, so you just might want to go to griddownpowerup.com.
There you go, Grid Down.
And that would give you information about how to watch that. I believe you said it's an hour, right?
Yeah, I'll go to the website right here.
Yes.
We'll check it out.
Yeah, it's just under an hour, about 57 minutes.
Okay.
Okay, I dropped the link in the chat once again.
All right, good deal. Yeah, there we go, griddownpowerup.com. It's a good place to get started if you want to find that and watch it. Let's see what's happening here in the...
All right. Looks like I don't have much of a lag. Am I still getting a little bit of a lag there on you?
No, it looks good.
Does it look good?
Yep, that is.
Sorry, I'm not sure what's going on. My computer, I'm running low CPU usage. I got a i7 here. I'm not really sure what's going on there. So we were fighting gremlins before I even joined, weren't we?
I know.
That's right. That's right. We were going to come on at 3:00 today. We spent about 40 minutes trying to get the technology worked out. So even when there's not an EMP or a solar flare, things don't work. Right. So we're really just a couple days away from catastrophe. And again, folks, we want to make sure that you understand. We're Christians here. We're not living in fear. We're just telling you the truth, telling you what's actually the case. And we'll talk a little bit about this biblical perspective for preparedness in just a moment. Where did we leave off? You were Jonathan was in he was I'm
still here.
I lost my
I
forgot where we were.
My internet's good, man. I'm not real sure. I'm trying to troubleshoot here. I don't know if it's something on your end, but I'm not real sure why this is happening.
Okay,
we've got good audio now.
The audio's good, but we don't want to keep people, of course, if we're not going to be able to work out the kinks. Very strange and unusual indeed. Maybe they just don't want this transmission to happen.
Satan doesn't want us talking today.
I know.
Oh, this is his day of the year, isn't it?
Well, we are going to have all of your links underneath the video so people can find your white paper and your biography and your wonderful write-up about a biblical perspective for preparedness, which is fantastic.
Yeah, I'm going to share that with people here on the channel.
Yeah, feel
Anyway.
free to share any of that. I could probably get you a Word document or a PDF document on that too.
Okay.
When we get off here.
Okay. Yeah, anybody that wants that, we can email it out.
Let me tell you, while we've got the audio, if you want to, if I got a couple things here. I wanted
we can sit. We can keep chatting.
Yeah, I want to bring this up to you.
Get to look at my face.
On you remember when was this? Let me get the date that this happened. There was a story that came out. This is July of this year, Wednesday, July 26th of this year, where a Colorado family who partially mummified remains. Now, this is the first sentence of the article. A Colorado family whose partially mummified remains were discovered at a remote campsite. So this is interesting how they covered this. These were survivalists, right? These were people who were going off grid. And the way the media covered it was, the assumption was, look, you should just never do this. Look at these people. They went out into the wilderness and they died. And it's childish the way they cover it, and it's Summer's perspective anyway, right? That you feel like they want to keep people from
feeling comfortable in nature.
Yeah.
There's so many different shows about when you go into the woods and, you're going to die or you're going to run into some sort of creepy ghoulie, it's just like endless shows of that kind of thing on YouTube, for example, mystery shows. And it builds a lot of insecurity for people to feel like I could never go out into the woods, or maybe if I'm in the woods, there's going to be like a deliverance guy out there, or, there's going to be some sort of chupacabra that's going to come and eat me.
Yeah.
Do you think those things are done intentionally, or do you ever think about anything like that? As far as social engineering?
There is absolutely a very bad narrative on preppers. Anytime you see a story on preppers in the media, it is a negative story. I've never seen a positive. So I don't actually use the term prepper. I use the term preparedness, self-reliance, just because of the negative connotation with, quote, prepping. And there was a show here a while back called Doomsday Preppers, and I don't even know where they found some of these crazy people, because I've been in this industry. I've spoke at PrepperCon, multiple. I've met tens of thousands of people. I've done book signings, and I have never met the weirdos that I see where they find these people. So
yeah,
absolutely, it's always some big bearded guy like living in the ground, and so technically these people must exist somewhere. I've never met them, and I've traveled every inch of the preparedness community. All right, I'll have to admit I've met one or two, but it's very few. Okay.
Well, let me tell you. Let me show you this. Let me just go over here and share my screen with you. Let's go back to the old school way. I want to show you something that the FBI has done. Let's see. Let's present.
Oh, we're on the list now. I know that.
Yeah.
We're on the list of dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, so is the soccer mom that voices her objections at the town hall meetings too. So.
Yes. As they look the other way with the open border.
Okay, there it is.
Yeah.
Let me show you this. There we go. Now you might be able to see that. On the FBI, it links from the FBI website. It's publicintelligence.net. Now check this out. Let me show you where we come into this. This is on Public Intelligence. It's FBI domestic terrorism. Oh boy, here I go on YouTube saying these words again. Algorithm just kills us.
The FBI reference guide.
Yeah, for extremism. Mm-hmm. Okay, so they have all kinds of people that they keep an eye on, but it's interesting here because when you go into these, where they're talking about the symbols and the terms that are used, this was a little bit.
Gadsden flag on there, Tree of Liberty's on there.
Yeah, look at
I can't
this
see what
now.
You got up, but
right here, you've got the term prepping, and you've got. And you've got SHTF, or for preppers to say it's a term used to describe stockpiling of supplies, often including food, water, medical equipment, and weapons in preparation for a man-made natural crisis, or I don't know why they put man-made natural crisis, or natural crisis. While this can include illegal explosives, illegally modified firearms, prepping is generally legal and is not in itself an indicator of militia or violent extremism. But there it is on their site for something to look out for. And here's.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I do have to be careful. I mean, I am a guest at the FBI's InfraGard meeting, so
Yeah.
I want to be careful what I say. I am very concerned with some of this information. I don't think it's through the rank and file down at the lower ends, but I don't know. We're seeing some of that.
I agree with you. This is political. A lot of this is
You
just.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
This is an unelected leadership issue. I want to. Just because I'm on here as a representative of the task force, I want to be careful what I say about any government agency. So
absolutely,
yeah.
well,
it's a problem.
We do have a question in the chat that says, how should expiration dates on canned foods be viewed during a worst case scenario?
Okay, so I have to put the caveat out there. I am not a doctor. I'm not a medical advisor. I am not a lawyer. Talk to a food professional. I don't know what else I need to say here. So, canned food, a lot of it has to do with where you have it stored. If you've got canned food in your garage in Arizona, at high elevation, and it's freezing and thawing, that kills food. But if you have it in a cool place or even, temperature controlled house, my personal experience is food will last much, much longer than the expiration date. The big thing, if you crack it open and it smells, don't eat it, obviously. The longer it goes past expiration, usually you're going to lose nutrition. And it depends on what you're cracking open. If it's a can of soup with meat inside of it, you run more risk of that. Again, I don't want to go too far. There's a lot of information online on this topics. I tell people to stockpile multivitamins, not gel caps, but the hard style, a solid tablet, and stockpile some of those in your deep freezer. That kind of extends the shelf life. So there's different. Yeah, I won't say much more than that, but yes, even the industry admits that food lasts longer than the expiration date.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know what you mean. We always have to be really careful about the way we frame some of these, because it's a litigious society. We could, if it looks like you're trying to give someone advice, and it gets kind of dangerous. So okay, let's talk about for our viewers. If you get more questions that pop up over there, anything good while we've got Jonathan here, we've got good audio.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about this biblical perspective on prepping. I'll set you up here because I've got. Let me stop sharing here so it looks right on our screen. There we go. Okay. Now I went and just tried to get some perspectives from, around Christian America. Should a Christian be a prepper or in any way be involved in doomsday prepping? There's some language there again that they're using. Biblical view of survivalists and preppers from Focus on the Family. They say things like, well, it's a fact. It's true. Prepping today, it's big business. It's become an industry, websites, books, products, promising of inside information. This is how they're framing it. To be considered, here's an interesting point. They say to be considered a prepper, a person must be preoccupied with thoughts of preparing for an impending disaster. I remind you, folks, this is coming from a Christian source. Anyway, so they're just making the point here that if it's a self-centered survivalism, if that's the motivation, it becomes a lifestyle that can't be supported by Scripture. But they're making the case that a lot of the prepper community is motivated by fear.
I think 2,000 years of human history would disagree.
Yes.
Before we had refrigeration, electricity.
Right, I agree with you too, and that's why I want to set you up, because this biblical case, folks, you can find this on the website as well if you go to, let's see,
the research tab.
Yeah, griddownconsulting.com and the research tab. Mm-hmm. And the biblical perspective on preparedness is excellent. I want you folks to check that out. This is very good. So you'll hear the arguments against it. I'll set you up by making the arguments against. Right? We've got the classic. Well, what you need to do. You need to be like. the prophets who the Lord just took care of, right? They didn't worry about what they were going to eat. The Lord just took care of them. You know, we've got scriptures that tell us, you know, don't worry about what's coming tomorrow. We've got these scriptures that do say that, but that's not, you know, they're not really the people who use these passages to say that, well, we ought not be worried about prepping or anything. We should just rely on the Lord to care for us. Would you like to respond to those?
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, I'll start out by saying that I mean, I would agree with the premise that a lot of the preparedness community on YouTube they do peddle and fearmonger and then sell you a long-term food package, which typically only has about a third of the calories that you need based on the amount of time they're selling you. So there are a lot of cheapskates and swindlers and snake oil salesmen in the preparedness community. So I'll say that right off the bat. A lot of the biggest experts online don't really understand the threats, and they're in it to make money. So I will not. I'm 100% on that wheelhouse, right? So some people do sell fear to sell you products. I might sell some hats and T-shirts, but I don't get paid by any food companies. I'm not sponsored by anybody. I've intentionally not taken sponsorship for that reason, because I don't ever want to be in a position where I'm warning people about a very dangerous threat and then making money off of that. So, with that said, so yeah, there are different biblical perspectives on prepping. The first one you mentioned, the scripture you were discussing was Matthew 6:25. Do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you'll wear. I think it said that a couple verses later says something to the effect of like, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. So that would be Matthew 6. I think it's the later part of the chapter that's discussed. And that is a common section that people basically, that's one of the more common scriptural areas that people use against preparedness. But the problem is that's talking about anxiety and worry. So I tell every one of my clients, I tell in my book, I mean, this biblical perspective on preparedness at the end of my first book, I tell people all the time, do not operate preparedness in fear. I'm not telling you to go out and cash in your kid's college fund and, you know, spend all your money on this product or that product. I'm just telling people to be aware of what's coming around the pike and understand the threat and have a plan of action for your family. And it is scary, but that's why we have Jesus Christ, and we rely on him to get us through the hard times. My company motto is prepare for the worst, hope for the best, and let God do the rest. So our job is basically to make wise decisions. God's given us stewardship. We live in the richest country in the world for a reason. We have the financial ability to do certain things that, you know, prior generations did not have those abilities. But basically, so that's a common one. But like if I were to, you know, don't worry about tomorrow, worry about self, don't worry about what you eat or drink or about your body, what you're, you know, but who does that? I don't know a single woman, you know, I've been married 25 years. I don't know a single woman that goes to the grocery store and buys food for that day. Maybe if you live in some village in Spain, you get away with that. Yeah. But yeah, I'm sure everybody meal plans for the course of a week, right? And, you know, if something's on sale, you may buy enough stuff to get you through for 6 months on that one particular product because it was on sale, right? So everybody's thinking, you know, that's kind of silly. You're kind of taking that, what he's saying there, out of context. It's about overly worrying, living in fear, and not trusting in Christ. We all plan ahead. I'm sure probably 95% of the people on your show have health insurance, or have home insurance, car insurance. They have insurance on their electronics. They have, you know, health insurance, you know, life insurance policies. All these insurance policies where if you didn't have that, people would be like, well, you're an irresponsible adult. You're an irresponsible father or mother. You're not preparing for a rainy day. That's all I'm saying is that, you know, people have got complacent with the fact that this just-in-time food delivery system, and they just expect food to always be at the grocery store. If that infrastructure stops, how are you going to feed your kids? How are we going to feed your daughter and your son? So some people will come back and talk to me about manna. You know, the Israelites wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. They'll come and tell me stories about Elijah getting fed by the birds, you know, the birds bringing them food out in the wilderness there. But both of those instances are times when God specifically told the Israelites, hey, go here. You're following a pillar of fire. You're following a cloud through the desert, okay? There's no cattle out there. There's no food resources for 600,000 or a million or however many Israelites left Egypt. God had to supernaturally feed them, or they would have all died in the desert, and the story would have taken a big left turn, wouldn't it? Same with Elijah. He told Elijah to go out to the wilderness. He told him to go there, so he supernaturally fed him. But those are what we would call descriptive texts, not prescriptive texts. Those are texts of Scripture that tell a story of God's grace and His benevolence, and you know, if you follow and you're obedient and you follow His instruction, that He'll take care of you. But you can't build a prescriptive, you know, I don't have to, you know, do anything or make any kind of preparations, because everybody does that. Everybody prepares at least some point in the future, whether it's a week or 2 weeks, depending on how often you get to the grocery store. So that would be kind of my counter argument to that. What does the Bible say in support? 1 Timothy 5:8 says, anyone who does not provide for their relatives and especially their own household has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. Now, with that said, this section, okay, context is talking about widows and orphans, okay? But the concept, I believe, still holds true. Anybody who does not provide for their relatives, and here, the second part, and especially for their own household. So I think there's a hierarchy, right? You can't save everybody. You can't stock up food and supplies. Most people aren't even going to understand. The first rule of preparedness is don't talk about it to begin with. But everyone's going to have to draw a line with how many people they can feed and take in and take care of if one of these scenarios happens. So I believe your first responsibility is to your immediate family, and then your next of kin, your siblings and your parents, and then, you know, take it from there. But you're not going to be able to save everyone in this scenario. Proverbs talks about the ant, you know, be like the ant, you sluggard, you know, so that basically plans ahead. You know, nobody guides them. They just work together and basically plan for a rainy day. Proverbs 22:3 is another verse. The prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and pay the penalty. We could talk about Noah, who was the first prepper. You know, God told him to build a boat. A lot of people don't realize He told him to provision that boat. Again, a lot of people don't realize it took Noah over 100 years, not just to build the boat, but to grow all the crops and grain and store all the food on the boat for all the animals that were going to be on the boat.
And they had never seen rain. They didn't understand what He said was even coming. They didn't understand
the concept.
Right.
Yep. What are you talking about? Water from the sky, you know? Yeah, he was the first prepper getting made fun of for sure. And then you have Joseph, you know, he gets the Pharaoh gets a vision from God. Joseph interprets, saying there's going to be 7 years of plenty followed by 7 years of famine. He wisely recommends Pharaoh build large grain bins and store up all the extra, you know, during the years of plenty for the years of slack. And then pull this one up here. I can't quote this one, but one other verse I would mention is Acts 11.
I've got them up on the screen here.
11,
that was Acts
27 through 30.
Yeah.
Acts 11, 27 through 30. I just found it here. It says, and during these days, prophets came down from Jerusalem to Antioch. And one of them, named Agabus, stood up and prophesied through the Holy Spirit that a great and severe famine would come upon the whole world. And this did occur during the reign of Claudius. So the disciples resolved to send relief, each according to his individual ability in proportion as he had prospered, to the brethren who lived in Judea. And so they did, sending their contributions to the elders by the hand of Barnabas and Saul. So I've kind of laid out two perspectives. And so basically they helped who they could help, but they sent help, right? There was a famine in the land, and they sent help. So there's kind of two perspectives here. I would say competing Christian perspectives, and that is the this is too heavy, this is too deep, this is too dark, I don't want to think about it. I'm going to put my head in the sand and just pull the God's going to see me through it card. Okay. But God gives people warnings for a reason. He gives you a brain for a reason. If you see the tide going out into the ocean, you know a tidal wave is coming. The Bible is very clear to make wise. We're called to make wise decisions and trust the things that we can't provide for on our own. We're to be stewards of money. We're to be stewards of our family. So we don't want to live in fear, but at the same time, you got to make wise choices. If you're stocking up on a bunch of long-term food and water in your basement for no reason, yeah, you're kind of nuts. You're kind of weird.
Yeah.
You know, but if you do your research into these topics, you know, we're just scratching the surface of kind of the information that we could discuss on just the grid down threat alone. If you do the research on this, you're going to realize this is a very real threat. I'm surprised it hasn't happened already, but I would contend that it's probably going to happen in our lifetime, and it makes a lot of sense to, you know, take it seriously. Again, don't cash in your kids' college fund. Be wise stewards of the money you have, but don't ignore the threat either, because if and when that day comes, you're going to be pretty upset that you didn't take the warning seriously.
Yeah, you know, and there's a point here in this passage where we see, I think this is always interesting to bring up because it shows how they each gave according to their ability. A lot of people, you know, want to pull up on this one and say, well, see, there you go. There's socialism. But the thing about that is these men, these Christians were giving voluntarily. They decided to give. It wasn't an edict from above. And Sum's got you got a question?
Yeah, I was just going to say, in lieu of what you were just speaking about, can you take us through like the first 2 weeks of grid down, what that would look like for people?
Sure. So most people have about 2 weeks worth of food in their house. Most people go to the grocery store once a week at this point in time. Everybody's a little bit different. So it depends on where you live, how far away you live from a grocery store. But I would say by the end of 10 days, maybe 2 weeks, and you have to realize your oven's not going to be working, your microwave's not going to be working. You're not going to have clean water to make a lot of this food unless you're walking down to a creek and carrying water back, and then you have to make sure you purify it and boil it. There's 100 things here that get in the way of just making a simple food preparation. But probably within 2 to 3 weeks, most people are going to have eaten through their food in the house. Well, I will take a step back. Day 0, you have a EMP attack is instant, nanosecond, whole country, boom, everything just stops where it's at. All electric infrastructure. So you're going to have no TV, no internet, no radio. Nobody's really going to know what's going on unless they understood this threat beforehand. So depending on the proximity you are, there's like a 20% chance your car could be completely fried and your car wouldn't function to begin with. None of the gas pumps are going to work, even if your car did function. All the red lights in all the major cities blink out. So an EMP attacks small microchips, the silicon microchips, and silicon microchips run just about everything today. So, you know, even if some of the cars do function, enough of them are going to break down on the road to basically gridlock every major city. The police officers, 911's not functioning. The radios aren't functioning. Their jail cells probably aren't functioning. They're not, even if they could get their cars to function, they're not going to be able to get around town because of the gridlock traffic. Even if they could get around town, again, 911's not working. The radios aren't working. They're just going to be, you know, first day or two, especially in the big cities, you're going to see people, you know, there's no lights, there's no street lights, there's no anything. It's a dark world, right? So people, it's going to be crimes of, you're going to see TVs and sneakers being stolen first, obviously, similar to any kind of looting type scenario. And then by the end of day 2, going into day 3, people are going to realize, you know, this is kind of a big deal. Like, our cell phones aren't working. We have no ways of, we haven't heard anything. This is really weird. And then people are going to start panicking. They're going to clean out the grocery stores, the distribution centers in the big city within the first 3 to 4 days. Mass looting. I mean, just look at some of the rioting and looting we've had over stupid. I mean, you get rioting and looting after a hockey, you know, after the Stanley Cup.
Yeah.
It does not take much to push people into rioting and looting these days. Especially in this type of scenario where nothing's working, your water's not working, your heat and air conditioning, you know, if you're in Arizona, there's no air conditioning. That place is going to go back to becoming a desert again. The people only live there because of electricity. If you're up in the northern climates, there's no heat for your house. People have backup generators. Most people only have enough diesel for 3-4 days, maybe a week. At some point, you will run out. So you're looking at a scenario here where basically everything stops, and things are going to fall apart really, really fast. So again, this is a common misconception here is normalcy bias. People just expect things to continue. And I talk about this in my report that I mentioned earlier on the show, Grid Down Destination, free report, 122 pages on the psychology and physiology of starvation and human desperation. It's very important that you read the historical narratives and read the horrific, tear-jerking stories of what real life is going to look like in this scenario. Because people just, they just can't imagine the richest country. And, you know, we have law and order, we have military, we have police, we have firefighters, we have hospital workers. The hospitals are going to run out of diesel power within a couple days. They're going to be overwhelmed with patients, and a lot of their equipment could be fried. Their stuff in the ICU could not be functioning. People are, again, stranded. New doctors aren't going to be coming in for their shifts. At some point, the doctors, the hospital workers, the police, the firemen, they're going to go home to protect their family and loved ones. It will become Mad Max, every man for himself. So again, I'm sitting here and I'm rattling things off, and people are going, "Oh my goodness, this guy's selling fear." I'm really not. I'll be honest with you. I'm really underplaying what I could kind of get into here. If you look at history and much better off society, I guess you could say much better resource societies that had more life skills than we have today, that completely fell apart, you know, cannibalism, the whole 9 yards. So I'm not saying that's going to happen in week 2. And a lot of people's philosophy is, oh, we're going to hold hands and sing Kumbaya, and we're going to work together and we're going to fix this. That works as long as there's food. Okay. Natural disasters. Yeah, that works real good. You make a plan with your cul-de-sac or whatever, your neighbors, you've borrowed each other's mowers. So you have this kind of camaraderie thing at the fact. But what I prove in my report is, once people, I don't mean going hungry, but when you haven't eaten for a week, at the end of the first month, 6 weeks into this thing, there's going to be no groups. It's going to be every family for themselves. It's going to fall down the lines of kin. A book I highly recommend everybody reading is called The Dark Secrets of SHTF Survival by Selko Begovic. This is a man that lived through a kind of a grid down event for a year in a modern city that got surrounded during Bosnia and got cut off from resupply and electricity, and how that town, it was a modern city, like fell apart street by street. There's just this idea, we just live in this very protective environment, the reality of human nature. So again, I'm a Christian. I believe in the depravity of man, and when this type of situation happens, you're going to see the worst in people come out. You're not you get the best of people in after a tragedy. Everybody rallies and comes to their aid. You have to realize this is a national grid event. There's no FEMA. There's no country can feed 330 million people spread out across a massive landmass. There's going to be no help. You're on your own. So people will work together for a short period of time, but those bonds are going to break down when kids, children start starving, and as a man or as a wife or a mother, it's your fault the kids aren't eating. You can tell yourself it's not. But when you're sitting there, who's responsible for providing food for that small child? At the end of the day, it's you. And, it may be extenuating circumstances, but my point is, you're going to be kicking yourself, and you're going to be very upset with yourself. And so it makes sense to take these things seriously. And like I said, I'll say one more thing. The most important thing that you can do, what I don't want anybody to do, is just run out and buy a long-term food plan. It's the worst thing you could do. Most of the companies that sell long-term food plans are ripping you off. They'll sell you a 1-year food plan. You're actually only getting 3-4 months of calories. In my first book, Survival Theory, I talk more about the food industry and how you need to buy based on calories, not serving size. So I don't want anybody to run out and start buying a bunch of stuff. The most important thing you can do, besides read your Bible and pray and seek God through this, is to educate yourself. Understand the threat, understand what's coming, get a plan of action before you spend any money. Kind of build a plan of action. Where are we going to go? What are we going to do? Do that kind of stuff. What's going to happen is if this event happens, you've heard the warning at this point. We've explained to a degree. You go watch the documentary. You know the warning's coming. If you don't do anything, the day one of these scenarios happens, you're going to be sitting there saying, what do I do? The best thing you can do, even if you don't have a bunch of supplies, is have a plan of action. Is be forward thinking. No, hey, we're going to do this with my family. I'm going to do that. We're going to go to Uncle Bob's farm. He lives rurally. You know, figure something out. But don't ignore the threats. But you know, don't live in fear either. So it's a you're walking a knife blade, double-edged sword. You know.
I think I can help out.
Be wise.
I can help out just a little bit, and you've already got this in this biblical case where we just you know, if we just live daily from the Proverbs, we do well, right? That's really where we need to be. I think you said this earlier. Proverbs 21:20 in this translation: the wise store up choice food, but fools gulp theirs down. In Proverbs 13:16, this is what we were just talking about. A wise man thinks ahead. A fool doesn't, and even brags about it. So I've put that up on the screen there, Proverbs 13:16. Now, what's interesting here is this is when we hear people criticizing Christians, criticizing other Christians perhaps, or anyone who's preparing. You know, this is a concept we see throughout Scripture. You know, a text. How is it? A text without a context is a pretext for error. And if we take it out of its context, we've missed the point. Every prudent man acts with knowledge. The wise and prudent man and woman not only has knowledge, but they apply it. They use it. Wisdom is more than something that we have in our mind. It's what we do. Also says a fool lays open his folly, or you know, even he's happy to tell you he's just gonna sit back and be taken care of. The Lord's is gonna provide for him, and that's not the mentality. That's really not the mentality that Scripture is trying to impress upon us here. The folly of the fool is plain for the world to see, and it's open for everyone else to see. Here's what one theologian said: lacking this prudence, a fool expresses his folly, and he pours out his wrath, vaunts his vanity, exposes his thoughtlessness, and exercises no judgment. So we're especially as Christians living in this age, it's very important to exercise the wisdom that we have right before us that come from Scripture, which is our fully sufficient foundation for faith and practice and how to live in this world. So I think that I really appreciate that, this biblical case that you put together here.
If you let me add one point. I want to reiterate, I mentioned it earlier, so I probably came off a little bit harsh. I'll say it again. If you're stocking up food and water in your basement and you're a big prepper and there's no real threat, if you're doing it because you know this or that or aliens are coming, you're nuts, you know. And so you mentioned an article, and you don't have to say who wrote it, but you know, it's from a Christian organization, a large Christian organization there that we probably all know. They just don't know what they don't know. So they're coming at it. So their perspective of preppers is probably the same perspective they've been seeing in the media as they just a bunch of weirdos that are, you know, that don't have their priorities aligned, and they're over focusing on this or that, and you know, they need to spend more time focusing on Christ. So there's a case to be made there, right? So you don't want to you don't want this to rule your life, because there's bigger things in life, like your family, that you need to be focused on. So don't live your life in fear. So I want to reiterate that, right? So I want to just make sure everybody hears me clearly. If you're not a prepper, I'm not calling you out. I'm not saying you're dumb. I'm just saying that if you look a little deeper down the the hole on these grid down threats, you'll probably change your mind in short order.
You know what I really love too about this biblical case is the point you made, a very specific point to explain that women, wives, are definitely a part of this process, and the biblical case, Proverbs 31 woman, right? So I like what you said there. Just talk about that for a minute. Talk about how husbands and wives can work together in this.
Yeah, probably 30% of the clients I work with are the wives in in the situation. The husbands, they're busy with the career and work, and this is something that they have turned over, passed down to their wives to handle and look into. So, and we are to be of one accord with our spouse. Okay. So this is not something you want to be stalking away, spending a bunch of family resources without talking to your spouse about this. And a lot of times if you're talking to a spouse about this, because you watched a 2-hour program from some idiot on the internet, and now you're stressed out and you want to make wise decisions and start doing stuff, but your spouse doesn't have the same information. So you got to be gentle. You got to take this stuff slow. You got to kind of bring people on board, and that's what I'm saying. This isn't like a rush out and spend all your money on this stuff. I'm just saying that you need to educate yourself, educate the people in your family, be of one accord. Proverbs 31 talks about the woman, I can't quote the entire Proverbs 31, but I know it talks about, her children do not go cold. There's food to eat, there's clothes, they're doubly clothed for the winter. She's thinking ahead. She's buying a field. She's planting a vineyard. She's a good steward of the familial money and resources. She's making extra money to do these things, as a side gig. So I think this should be something, typically the man is the breadwinner out there, beating the pavement, and the wife is the one that's typically going to be taking care of the food and the provisioning and stuff. So a lot of times this does fall into her territory. So whether you're a female, wife, single, married, husband, if you're on your own, you can do whatever, you are the master of your own destiny outside of God. But if you're married, you need to just make sure you're don't bring conflict into the home. You know what I mean? Take it slow, take it easy. Don't scare them into oblivion.
Yeah, I like how it ends up there. She is not afraid of the future. Right.
Yep.
She let's see, where is this here? She some translations say it different ways. She laughs at the future, and I'm not sure if there's a translation that says that exactly, but that's the idea, right? It shows. I'll just read it right off the.
She's a diligent woman. She's not idle. She's provisioning and taking care of her family, and she's thinking towards the future for sure.
A woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. I think that's probably a good spot to leave that one. That's
the final. Yep, that's the end of it.
And honor her.
Give her her due. Give her her praise.
Honor her for all that her hands have done, and let her works bring her praise at the city gate. So before people. Yeah. Summer, anything else happening over there in the...
Well, somebody asked, what is a fuel option for vehicles during a worst case scenario?
That's good.
Ooh, okay. That's a complicated, so it depends on what we're talking about. Depends on what kind of scenario. An EMP attack, there is a chance your vehicle won't run. A fuel answer, I mean, there's... that's a loaded question. We would spend the next hour on that. I actually have a video on my YouTube channel, Jonathan Hollerman. On YouTube, I have an hour-long bug-out vehicle video, so you can check that out.
Ah, perfect. Okay.
Yeah, I watched that one. Yeah, that's good. I'll make sure we get the link to the YouTube channel up here too.
We will.
All right. How long have we been going here, Sam? Do you have any idea? John, yeah, let's see.
92 minutes.
Okay, that's probably good. What do you think, Jonathan? That's a good spot right there. So that it keeps.
There's a lot more to talk about, but we can always do it later.
I'd love to. If you'd like to come back sometime, I'd love to.
Yeah.
To get together and do this more. That's what we were telling the viewers in the last couple of weeks and leading up to today, that we want to make sure that this is something that we add in. What our ministry, we have a Christian media ministry here, and what we're doing is just what we're doing here in this show today. Identifying the threat. What is the threat? Looking at current events and filtering it all through the lens of the Christian worldview, because that's the one that's true. Everything founded on Scripture in context, so that we're faithful and safe. So that, as we talked about before, these when it comes to a situation where there's a catastrophe and things are falling apart, faith is all you're going to have in some cases, right? This is, and this is why that's our true food is the Word of God, and it fills us and sustains us and carries us through these hard times. So we want to make sure that people understand that. There's a lot to this, as you've said so well in what you've written and you've said here today. This is the things that can happen in a catastrophe like we're talking about are horrible things to think about. But it requires real decisions to be made. These are a lot, as you said, there are a lot of people who talk about this issue who don't know, they've never experienced what it's like to be around people who are starving, and what happens to the mind in those cases. So we want to be faithful. Jump in. Go ahead.
Yeah, can I chime in real quick? As Christians, it's so hard. We're so focused on our life here on earth, our job, our career, our children, their extracurricular activities, my retirement, my 401k. The amount of time that we're on this earth is a blimp on the screen in comparison to eternity. Leonard Ravenhill's a pastor, an older pastor. He's passed away that I liked. He's got some good sermons, but we need to have our eyes fixed on eternity. And these are heavy things that we're focused on down here. But the beauty of being a Christian and having faith in Jesus Christ is the fact that this isn't our final destination. This is just a blip down here. I mean, Nero used to use Christians and Jewish people as candles in his gardens, right. Human candles. So it can get a lot worse, right? We're living in pretty peaceful times. We get so bent out of shape all the time about this happened in life, this happened in life. It's in the scheme of things, it's, I don't want to, bad things do happen to people, Christians from time to time, but in the scheme of things, what does Paul say to live is gain, to die? I'm gonna butcher it, but basically death is not a terrible thing to consider if we're going to have eternity with Christ. So keep your eyes focused on eternity, and these scary things and these concerning things down here on earth won't seem so bad.
Absolutely. That's the way. That's Philippians 1:21. Paul says, for me to live, for to me, living means living for Christ, and to die is gain. So and that's what, as far as I'm concerned, and what I'm learning here, because I'll let you know, just like I've told everyone here, that I don't know nearly enough about what we're talking about here today. This has been over the past week, going through your book and the paper and your website. So I'm going to be learning right along with those viewers who are in this same situation too. And I know there's a lot of people watching who are well prepared, well versed. So I look forward to this process. If we can come back together and do this more, we want this to be a part of what we're doing here, because it's relevant. It's absolutely relevant. And I think I'm glad you brought that up, Philippians 1:21. To live, for me to live is Christ, to live for Christ to live in me. I am in him and he is in me, and to be wise and to be prepared, to put myself in a position where I can help out, when if something catastrophic happens, and then to be filled with the wisdom to know how to make hard choices when the time comes. Because I don't think as you just said here, we really are spoiled here in America. We've had it good for a long time, and it could get a lot worse, but before we would start complaining. But I appreciate what you've given us here today, and we look forward to coming back again. Summer, is there anything we want to last question to leave with here?
Well, we did have another question for you in the chat.
Sure.
If we stash electronic devices in a safe, would that protect them in case of an EMP?
Yes, no, maybe no. So this is again I will keep this one short. Here's what I'll tell you: 99% of the information you're going to get on EMP protection Faraday cages on the internet, on YouTube, is just flat out wrong in almost every case. If you type in EMP Faraday cage, they're going to tell you to put your stuff in microwaves. They're going to the largest video has 60,000 views at this point, 500,000 views of teaching people how to put stuff in a garbage can for EMP protection. I mean, heck, if only the military knew that was a simple solution to protect all this stuff, they wouldn't have to spend $20,000 a day testing EMP testing stuff. So the truth of the matter is the information that the American people and companies and anybody outside of so the EMP protection standards are TS2 level. They're the highest level of classification. Need to know only. You're not going to get access to that information. I don't have access to that information. What I do know is that the military EMP protection standards that you can download on your computer off the internet right now, Mil Standard 188-125, and everywhere you go, when someone says, "Oh, this is EMP protected," you go, "It's EMP protected, the military standards." Well, the only standards they have access to are the unclassified ones. There's a reason why during the Barack Obama administration, good for him, they spent $4 billion rehardening Cheyenne Mountain based on new information on super EMPs that we have that the enemy nations have. So those old military protection standards from 1981 may or may not protect your equipment. I know there are new military hardening standards. NORAD was moved back into Cheyenne Mountain after that $4 billion renovation and EMP hardening, and they specifically said it was to protect against new information on EMP attack. I don't have access to that new information. I know there's a new written standard. I know the document number, but you can't have access to that. So my point being is EMP protection is not an easy answer. So I have talked to, I get to rub shoulders with these guys at the top testing labs around the country, and I've asked them for the average Joe. You're probably not going to like this answer, but you need 3/16-inch plate steel, double welded, die tested, at least 100 decibel gasket on your lid. That's a very thick piece of metal with zero penetrations into it. So it's not easy. When I work with my clients and we need EMP protection for their electronics and night vision and thermal optics and stuff like that, we'll spend not me, but they'll spend $10,000 on a chest style freezer professional Faraday cage from a company like Holland Shielding. So it's actually very expensive if you really want to be safe. But here's the caveat. If we're talking about at ground zero, if you're near ground zero where the EMP detonates right above you or nearby you, yeah, you're gonna get a big kick in the pants. But we don't know where they're gonna strike. If you're 600 miles, 1,000 miles away from where the EMP is detonated, yeah, you might. So all these people, here's the answer. All these people that are saying, hey, if you do X, Y, and Z, your stuff will definitely be protected. They're not telling you the truth because they don't know. Even the ones that quote say they're NASA engineers or, my dad was a fancy electronics professor, whatever. They don't know because they don't have access to the top secret data. With that said, I have stuff in garbage cans. Okay. So there, because I can't afford the $10,000 chest out freezer. So my answer to you is yes, you can use some of these nesting, buying ESD static bags that have 40 decibels of protection. They're I can't remember some of the companies that sell them. Do 2 layers, put plastic in between them, double layer it. You'll get protection. If you're at ground zero, my point is don't put anything in there you have to trust your life to. If this is going to be the difference between life and death, it's the backup motherboard for your generator or for your motorcycle to get out of town. If it's something that you have to trust your life to, I just don't want to give definite answers. So anybody that's giving you a definite answer on EMP protection, they don't have the answer to give you.
Ultimately, we're trying to solve problems.
That was supposed to be short.
Yeah. Well, we're trying to. This is the nature of this beast, right? We're trying to solve problems of which we've never gone through. I know in your paper you give some historical examples of where these things have happened before. But as we sit here today, we're talking about things that are just unfamiliar territory for us. And I think it's important as we wrap up here, let's 1 Thessalonians 5, 16 through 18, rejoice always, pray continually, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus. What did that mean? Give thanks in all circumstances. Even when the catastrophe comes, whether it's a worldwide or whether it's in your own life, James the Just tells us that
James 1,
it tells us that these trials, the things that come to us from the outside, these trials are there to grow us spiritually. That's tough for a lot of us. It's tough for me as I sit here thinking about it. Like, as the grid goes down and no one can eat, how is that? Well, the Lord's ways are inscrutable. I don't know his ways, but I know what my purpose is, and I know that this word is true. It's absolute truth, and to give thanks in all circumstances, even when the grid goes down.
Yeah.
For what the Lord is going to do with that. The Lord has brought down wicked nations before. Maybe we're one of those. I don't know, but we're Christians in this world, and we're supposed to be different. We're supposed to look different. People are supposed to see us and understand there's something different about these people. I want what they have. And that's how we do it. We give thanks in all circumstances, rejoice always, pray continually, and prepare for the worst and finish it. What's the motto?
Prepare for the worst, hope for the best, and let God do the rest.
That's it. There you
Amen.
go. Yep. Amen to that. All right. Well, Johnson, we really appreciate you being here with us and navigating our technical difficulties, but we're going to give thanks in all circumstances and rejoice for the opportunity to do this. And the
we're
Lord
so
allowed
grateful
us.
that we found you. So thank you for being with us, and we would love to have you on again.
No Absolutely. Let me know. I'll be there.
All right.
Perfect.
Hang out right there for just a moment. I'm going to jump off the live stream here, and we'll get back with you in just a second. Folks, thank you for being here with us today. Again, please visit all. We've got links. We get to the book, the website. Everything is in the description. This video. We'll do a Substack article as well with notes from this interview and all the links. So that'll be shared as well. And we look forward to seeing you again here next time. Armor of Truth Live number 271. Later this week. Mm-hmm. There's a busy week for us this week, so we're not sure when our next live show will be this week. But thank you, folks. God bless you. We'll see you here again next time.